See here, this is a workflow, right? Okay, this is
Yeah.
a workflow. This is action. Okay, resource assignment action, and then we have input. So input has a resource resolution. It's a property called required, and it's a property called type, right? So we have defined the type. This is the enriched content, right? So the type, as you all know that all the types are defined in the data types. Okay, so we don't want to regenerate this one. So already all types are defined in the data types. Okay, so you have a DT resource assignment, and you could see that DT resource assignment already, all the properties. It has a required and all the natures there. So input has already all defined types also. Even output also, the output modeling it's a little bit tricky, and then it is also, it defines the type on it itself. Okay, so if you try to look at the response property, it has a type here. Okay, so it means like you can also define a type here, or you can refer a data types property outside, or you can define a data types here, and then you can map them. So what I'm trying to say is like the workflow has the action information, workflow has the input information, and as well as output information, and all the properties whatever present here, it has a mapping, and it has a reference, it has a definition for that. Okay.
Here I get, I'm quite confused. In the input, we have resource assignment properties. This seems to be parameter, yeah, complex type. So now, when I am going to write it into a file, what am I going to say to them? Like,
no,
you need
assume
to
that. Assume that input can be the property can be a complex or simple type, right? So in this case, it is a simple type, right? So in this case, what I'm trying to, it is a simple. You can also define simple as well as complex also. That is the point I'm trying to.
So if it is complex, what are we going as? I mean, if I'm going to say to a client that there is this workflow and these are the inputs, so in that case, when I am going to produce them with a complex input parameter, so how am I going to ask them to fill the value in this way, or like?
That is what I'm trying to say. Okay. So that open spec, right? The whatever this open spec API we are trying to have, a definition called import also. Okay. So in that you are going to import this data type dot file. Okay. So it means like all the complex types that we are defining here. Okay, you are getting it right. So it's similar to the open spec. If you try to look into the open spec API, just let me look. Is there any open spec? I don't know. Okay, let me drill down these images. Okay, see here.
Yeah.
Here we have that API, right? Okay, here we have that API. Let me. Okay, I'm not sure whether we have anyone has the API or any link in handy so that I can launch immediately. Yeah. Okay, here I am. Got it. Okay. This is a Swagger information. So all those things we can get it from the metadata information, the top level and then metadata information. Okay. And then this is a path. Okay. This is an API. Okay. Whatever here, it's an API. Okay. Forget about the post because we are not going to use that this spec actually. Okay. Open API spec because we are going to use a gRPC spec and which is not open API spec. So PET is an API, right? So this is nothing but URL link, right? Okay. So let me explain. So and it has a body. Okay, the body has a property, right? So the body has a property, and then it's like a consumes. Okay, these are all types, right? What all the types that we have, and then operation ID we have an add pet. We have that add pets, and then input parameter. So here it defines the input, right? Okay, the body. Okay, so it has a schema reference. So this is nothing but the complex object, right? The definition.pet is nothing but a complex object. So you can define a n number of input properties, and then you can define a reference. Okay. So anyhow, this definition, the pet definition, it is going to be at the bottom called definition, which will be tagged under definition, right? So what I'm trying to say is
Okay.
like that the definition is nothing but the data type. So whatever I'm trying to say that definition is nothing but a data type. Here, if it is a complex type, whatever the reference, okay, let me take that also. Yeah. So the type is nothing but a reference. If the type is of primitive, then we don't want to further navigate. If the type is of complex type, which is not falling under primitive type, okay, then it is a complex type, right? Then it is nothing but a reference here, okay? I believe I answered your
So
question, right?
when we generate a file and we refer that it is a complex type like DT resource assignment properties, so is it client's responsibility to find out these DT resource assignment properties into the data type file of the CBA file, or are we going to attach this information also in the same file, same
Exactly. So that is
.yaml
the
file?
reason, no, the import capability just we are trying to give that. Import capability is nothing but it includes that file, okay? Okay, even it is a part of a standard, right? The import is a standard. You can include even it's a part of a schema standard also. You have a schema standard also, right? Schema can also import that other file. So this is like another reference file, okay, where you can have an import. In that API, you can import this file so that, no, I don't want to recreate the same thing, right? So this is nothing but the same, okay? This parameter is not going to change that, okay? So I don't want to recreate just only for the spec, just only I want to refer that, okay? Since they can't understand this workflow, that's the reason we are trying to give a mapping or transformation logic for this type, but we are not going to change that logic for the data type. Just we are trying to map this workflow as an API in a TOSCA format, and just by including this data type at the top. That's it.
Yeah, when we are saying including the data types, we are not going to include a separate data type file. We are just going to say that find the data type file in the data type folder, correct?
Exactly,
Right?
exactly. So the import like be similar like this, okay? That just stop, okay? So we have an import here, right? So import the file, that definition called data types, right? So in this case, here we have
Yeah.
that. Okay, so
Yeah.
similarly, so in that case, in that API spec, if they find that import and then if they see that file called this one, then automatically it will be during the context creation or during that rendering process, it should automatically import the data type in that part of that, right?
Yeah, I got it. I mean, they should have a code where they could.
Exactly. Or we can generate as a simple file. So in that case, API, while exposing an API, we can modify any content, right? Based on the nature. If they want as a single file, they can copy this content and then we can return. Okay. But whenever we are trying to access from CBA file, we should not replicate that or we should not duplicate that. That is the point I'm trying to make. Okay. If you're trying to
Yeah,
expose an
so
API, it's not going to return back that CBA file entirely directly. So we are just going to return
yeah,
the format, right? We are just
yeah.
returning the content. So at the time, we can read the data type content and we can look like what all the contents needed for this case, and then we can return. We can create a program logic just to what workflow, understand the workflow and understand that what all the dependencies and retrieve from the data types and only pass those only data types there.
Okay, now again coming back to the same question, are we going to expose an API or
Going
a
to expose
file?
an API.
Because
Okay, we are going to expose an API. Okay, but it will be in a TOSCA one API just from backing perspective. Okay, we are going to have it in a CBA file, but certain cases, no, think about the cases. I may not, I don't want to, I'm not interested in the entire CBI, just to only give that what action that I want to call and then what is the format, just I want to make. Okay, irrespective of, I can create my own client code according to mine, but the only thing is just give the spec for one action. In that case, it is very costly to download the CBA file to there and then just include that, okay. Sometimes it's like a security violation also, another thing. I don't want to give that entire CBA to you completely.
okay.
You're getting it, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I don't want to expose all the content present inside that, just to only the spec. Okay, if you are allowed to access for this particular action, just I can give that, only the API
So
information.
the if I am going to write an API, it should be a JSON response, right? It should
Yeah,
not be
JSON
an
response,
YAML.
it should be a content field. The content may be any type. That's the thing. It may be YAML or it may be JSON.
Okay. In that case, when we are going to refer to a data type, so we would write something like Open API spec has written
No, 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 no,
referring.
not open it. I'm trying to talk about the type of JSON or YAML or format. Okay, what format that we are
Yeah,
going to
yeah,
return?
I got it. In the content of the JSON, we will place our YAML content, but
Exactly.
what I'm trying to ask is if it is a CBA file, we will not. If it is a CBA zip file, we will not be requiring to put this data type information in that same API file. But when we are going to expose a gRPC API, so now we are going to form a JSON response where YAML content will contain this data type. I
Exactly.
mean the complex data type information also.
Exactly.
So I'm asking whether we could put this data type information like the same way the Open API has done, like just refer to this data type at this point of time like that.
No, that is okay. Okay. So it's very simple. Okay. Expose and REST API with a property called blueprint name, version, and what is the written format, whether it's a JSON or XML or YAML. That's the three properties that you are going to collect here. Okay. And workflow name. That's the only thing. So total 5.
So we are going to support all the three XML, JSON, and YAML. I was expecting in the
No,
same
JSON and
JSON.
YAML. We are going to support 2, right?
JSON and YAML, and the specification type should be TOSCA, right? That's what we said.
Exactly. Spec type is TOSCA. Data type, data format is YAML or JSON.
Yeah, that's correct.
No, I didn't get. There are two only, JSON and XML, and the content must be in either in the format of. It should be in the format of YAML, right?
Yeah, exactly. So this can be defined as a YAML also. You know that, right? So this can be explained in YAML format itself.
Right. This can be a YAML or JSON. I think what we can do for now is stick with JSON and not do any other
Exactly, not with YAML. Okay, yeah, that's
So
also
just
fine.
stick with JSON to keep it simple for phase 1. Let's go with JSON, and then later on we can do YAML.
Exactly.
So the blueprint name version we said as well, and the workflow action. The only other thing that I was thinking, Brenda, we need sometimes we need to also say what is the template prefix, because you can have multiple
template prefix means, can you tell a little bit, explain?
So template it's artifact type. So I want to execute an action for this specific template and mapping.
No, that is not needed, right? Because we are trying to talk only at a high level of workflow. Only we need this workflow input information. That's the thing. To invoke certain action, what we need is you need to know only workflow.
Right, but the workflow, you see how right now your artifact prefix name is base config, right?
Prefix, this one. I think this is a property, right? This is a property. It comes under the input, right?
Yes,
so
yes.
Okay, so what are the inputs we are going to have completely inside that, right?
What I'm trying to say is that if, let's say, you can add a list of template prefixes, and that will include a list of mapping files as well. Does that? I guess it may not matter for us.
Yeah, because the enrichment process will handle that. Because we are trying to talk the enriched content only, not pre-enriched content. If it is an enriched content, everything will be populated. That's what just before I explained that. Okay, the workflow will have that auto-generated dynamic mapping. So it generates a dynamic mapping type.
Okay, so template prefix is not needed for now. Okay, so then we said specification type is going to be TOSCA and data format is going to be JSON for us.
Exactly. Now define the spec type also. Right now we definitely we are not going to support other thing, but include the spec type also. Spec type we can have a TOSCA. That's it. Simple.
TOSCA, yes.
Later point of time, if there is any reason, just we want to support extra things, we can add that.
Okay.
Brinda, I'm actually confused at the part where we are mixing both JSON and TOSCA, because data type file is in JSON format, and we are going to form a document. I mean, we are going to create our workflow API information in YAML format. So if I'm going to expose an API, So which format actually I am going to format?
Okay, okay. Just let me explain. This is a TOSCA format. You assume that, right? So this is a TOSCA format, right?
TOSCA, but it
Spec.
is in JSON.
Yeah, yeah. TOSCA spec with the
Yeah.
JSON format, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we are even resource mapping, right? Resource mapping. So what you should definition. Okay. So what is this one? What is
This is JSON.
this is JSON. But we are trying to say that this is also a TOSCA format. Why? Because we are using properties in a TOSCA format, and then we are using a node template inside that. It's also TOSCA format, or TOSCA spec, right? Sorry for the confusion.
Oh, yeah, informations are related
Yeah,
to TOSCA.
it's like a partial, not completely. Okay, what I'm trying to say,
Right.
it's like nearly 90%. It's like a TOSCA spec. Okay, but extra two things that we added out of the TOSCA because TOSCA doesn't support that, or that context is supported by TOSCA. But we defined as the concept in a TOSCA. That's the point I'm trying to make. So similarly, okay, we are going to define a concept, okay, for workflow. We are trying to define a concept for API or specification for API. Assume that you have given a responsibility to define a API spec for a TOSCA. So in that case, we are the person trying to define some format, right? API should have that input, API should have that output, and then API should have an error.
Yeah.
So that format, tomorrow we can also ask bodies to this as definition. That is the point I'm trying to make. So now you define as a standard, some standard for API, which later it can be a spec inside TOSCA itself.
Okay.
You are clear? Already they have defined a
so
data
we are
type.
going to follow the same manner as TOSCA spec, but it will be in JSON format, the same way as our CBA structure.
Exactly. So we are using the data types. We are going to use all those types defined by the TOSCA yearly. Only the API, they haven't defined that. We are going to refer the same format. We are going to use that same way of how to refer the data types, properties, and all those things in the same way. Only thing is like we are just converting the workflow into API, and then we are trying to define API spec in a TOSCA format, in a TOSCA spec with the JSON format. That's it.
Yeah. What about the data type? Like currently we cannot. We have to send the data types also along with our response, right?
Yeah, in that response we can read the content. We can send that, right? So if you are having a CBA file, I don't want to recreate that. If I'm trying to send only the format, only the content, right? Content as a string, okay, not as a zip file. So in that case, I can read that file and then send it as along with the content. I can attach in the content itself, right?
Okay. Yeah. I can attach it in a single response.
Yeah, in a single response, you can attach the API specification as well as the data type specification also. So in that case, you don't want to import there.
Okay.
Right. I think that would be the best way to do it. A single file that has both the API spec and the definition.
Exactly. One more clarification. It is not a file. It is a content. It is a content which combines API and as well as data type along with that.
Yes.
Yeah. Because this is a API we are exposing. And this would be a gRPC API, right?
Right now you can define a REST because I don't see a much problem in terms of performance, okay, or timing, because it won't take a much time, not more than less than a minute itself. We can handle that. If we are trying to say that is the download and then all those things, when it comes into picture, then we can also expose an gRPC endpoint. Okay.
Where this particular API has to be defined for
the designer.
REST?
Designer in the designer API.
Okay.
We have a module called designer API, right? Inbound module.
Okay.
Modules under the inbound, we have a designer. Okay, you can define a one REST controller. Okay, you can define a.
Okay.
API.
And our the enhancement.
Yeah, enhancements later we will talk about that. Just define an API slowly. We can go a little bit later. Yeah.
Okay.
Because that is another a little bit complex logic.
Okay. I think for me, I got an idea, so I can start developing this one.
Perfect. Janani, can you